Hey everybody, let's draw some vehicles. So let's start with the very basics. So here you can see three different vehicles using a square and a circle and a triangle. And basically with these three shapes, I draw everything I want. And it's easy to start with a side profile. So here you can see this car, and you can actually draw this car with drawing squares. So like this, rectangle here. So you can also change those shapes a little bit. Then here, and let's add a small square on the top. And now can start adding some details. So adding two rectangles here for the door. Then going to add a circle for the wheel. So also combining these shapes. So I'm using this line to cut off this part. So what I would recommend, if you're absolutely just beginning to draw, try to design a car or a vehicle you like using these basic shapes. Maybe start really simple, follow these examples I give here. So one way, if you're absolutely beginning with drawing, what I would recommend is to copy these drawings one by one. And copying is fine as long as you use it as practice. So that's also how I learned to draw. So when you've made this sketch like this here, like here, you can see here in the final one, I changed the lines a little bit, like this here. So basically adding details and changing some of the shapes, making this a little bit rounder, etc., making this a little bit like this here. And later I will tell more about this, but the key thing I want you to take with is that when you're sketching, try to use these basic shapes first, and then later add the details. So let's do the next one. And you can also see that my examples are really clean. So these lines are super clean, right? But normally my sketches actually looks more like this. So don't worry if your drawings are a bit rough. So again, using these shapes, like this here, adding shape like here, and now draw this one. And you can so how I would, so this would be my sketch. What I would do next is with an eraser. So you can totally do this on paper or in Procreate, or like I do here in Adobe Photoshop. It doesn't really matter that much because all these tools is just regular drawing techniques that you can also do on paper. So here, now I'm actually cleaning up the drawing, like this here, and then drawing in these details. And here I go along the shape. I will share a little bit more about it later. And the last one with the triangle, to draw the shape. So first we have this overall shape, and then you can start adding in smaller shapes inside this. So here for the cockpit, for the engines. So it's really good to practice drawing these drawings step by step. And then after that, you can start trying to maybe use internet to find some different vehicles and draw this the same way as I do. But in this ebook and in these videos, I will share a lot of vehicles you can use by practicing. So let's move on to the next image. So here we're going to the next step, drawing more in 3D. So moving this a bit here and making a new layer. Let's take a different color, something like this. So let's start. So I showed, maybe I can draw it here. So I showed a cube drawn from the front. But now if we add sides to it, one side here, one side here, it becomes more 3D. So when I'm drawing these objects, when I'm sketching, I also like to draw the sides you won't see in the final drawing. But I like to sketch them because that helps with getting the perspective right. So why I like to do that? For example, if I want to draw this cube in a different angle, so some here. So start with one side, and then I add another side. Like this here. Try to see if it matches up. I draw on this side. So now I see, oh, this is not really parallel to this line. So it always helps a little bit to draw the shapes. And in the final drawing, you of course would not show these lines, but it does help. So this is the square, and this one is always super clear which side it's directed to. For example, if you draw a ball or a circle, you don't know which point it's directing to, right? That's why I like to add these perspective guides. And later I will tell a little bit about perspective. But the first thing is what I want to tell us that we call these perspective guides, and this helps us know where the ball is rotated to. For example, if I want to draw the ball looking up, we can draw it like this, right? So now it's looking this way. So what I would recommend is try to practice this cube and this ball in different angles and etc. Getting a bit familiar with drawing these objects. So that would be a good exercise to start practicing. So here we have the cylinder, and with the cylinder, we don't know this side how this side is directed, but we see this side, right? We see these ones, so we can also show it like this here. So now it's directed this way. And when I draw these kinds of shapes are really important. So it's really great to actually start with learning how to draw vehicles of that reason. So let's draw this this tank. So start with a square, and throughout this whole book and these videos, I will share all these different vehicles you can start practicing by. So here we have this cube. So drawing through it to check it. Let's draw another cube below it, like this. And let's draw it here. So now I'm not trying to think about perspective. I want to show that in further along. So I want you to get familiar, to actually, as if you're drawing with building blocks, and to get familiar with it. And then here, like this here. So, and let's add a cylinder here for the gun. So here, here, and then a half ball here. So here you can also see I'm drawing through the shape, so I know how it lays there. So, and then you can actually, you could start clean it up, draw on top of it like this, and draw the sides. You're going to see, maybe add some extra details like this here. And if this gets a little bit hard, don't worry, I will show it in other in the tutorials I'm going to show next, how to take all these steps. But this could be something you can start practicing. Maybe you can start drawing. Here I drew a tank. You could draw the tank in different angles, maybe, or you can take a car and draw it in a perspective like this, only using these kinds of basic shapes. So here are some examples of using these basic shapes to draw these different kinds of objects, to just help you get some ideas. And I would recommend maybe start drawing them one by one. So let me show them. So here, let's draw this Haley. So here we have these perspective guides. Here, maybe add the cylinder here. And you don't have to, if you don't want to, you don't have to draw precisely how I did it. You can change the angle a little bit different, but the main thing I want you to learn is how to use these shapes to draw your own vehicles. And I actually use this technique also for drawing characters, drawing backgrounds. Yeah, you only use different methods and different shapes, right? Here, and these propellers, this here. First, try to be a bit loose, and if you're more rough than I'm here, then that's really fine. So here. And then when I have this, here's the lines. And then I'm going to draw on top of it. And can you see that I follow the shape when I draw these details? So really think about to follow these shapes when you're drawing to get a 3D effect. For example, here it's going around. So really try to think about these things. So here we've drawn this one. Let's draw quickly here this one. So here, here, it's here, here, here. Just this a little bit. And now start adding the details on top of it. And you can actually be really loose. So I actually like to draw rough like this. So it's just a sketch, right? Nobody will see the end result. So you draw these tires. This here. And then you can, after that, you can start adding more details. And when you think you're done, so try to really think, is this what I want? And then after that, you can finish it. But again, first, I just want to get you the idea that you can use these shapes to draw anything you want. Let's draw with the cylinder, this plane. So here I'm drawing this line, and then here we have the engines. Here the other engine. Let's draw in the wings, like this here, and the propellers, like this here, then here this part, then here, this thing here, and the cockpit, and then here. We make this a little bit longer here, this side. And then we have this plane. And usually I take a little bit more time and draw it more slowly. But these are basically the steps I take to draw these kinds of things. So let's draw this submarine. So in this ebook, in these video tutorials, I'll show a lot of side profiles, especially because drawing vehicles can be really complex. Then if you first draw the side profile, maybe looking at a photo of a vehicle you want to draw, and then of course I draw it often more stylistic, so I'm changing stuff. So in this side profile, I don't have to think about perspective. I can really focus on these things, right? Like this here. Then when I have drawn this side, I'm going to draw the same ball, but I add these perspective guides like this here. Then I'm going to draw on top of it, like this here, then here. So here, these windows, these follow the shape. So here, if I take a red color, you can see that it follows the shape of that object. So here, here, periscope, here. So I think you can, yeah, you can practice this by, again, copying these drawings, maybe make it a little bit different, play around with it. So now let's start a little bit more complex. And don't worry if you find this really hard, because I can totally understand that. So actually, first, let's focus on those three on the top. Let's take, I always use purple for construction. I don't know why. So here we have this cylinder first, because this submarine is basically cylinder based, right? So that's the most basic shape you can think of drawing this this submarine. Move it a little bit here, and let's draw another cylinder like this here. So, and here, erase these lines now. What I'm now going to do is going to connect these shapes. So you can actually morph these shapes to anything you want, right? So like this, making them more organic. And it depends a bit on the type of vehicle you're drawing, but you can change the shapes a little bit more. But I think it definitely helps to first draw these kinds of shapes first, so you know the overall shape. especially when you're starting out. It can help you with understanding the perspective. Go around here. So here I'm drawing these lines. Think about how these follow the shape. This here, this follows the shape here, going around. And you can also see I'm drawing through my shape. So even this line you won't see, I'm drawing it because that, for example, if I was drawing a ball and I would only draw it like this, it wouldn't feel correct. So for example, this feels too sharp then, but when you're actually drawing this ball like this here, and you're drawing through it like this and here, it feels more rounded. So always draw through your shapes. So here. So once you've drawn this basic shape, you can start adding some more on it, like this part. And basically adding shapes and trying to think about how these shapes are connected there. So I find it really important first for you to understand how to draw these kinds of shapes. So don't focus too much on the details yet. Of course, that will end up you a cool drawing, etc. But if you want to get better at drawing fast, I would really practice these things first a lot. And of course, if you like, go ahead, because of course drawing is fun and it's cool to have a finished drawing. But these kinds of things will help you drawing the most, progressing the most, it sounds. So perspective. A perspective is actually a whole different topic. I made a whole course about that with actually hours of videos, but I want to start with really basic perspective so you can actually start using. And if you want to learn more about perspective, check out that perspective course to learn more about perspective. But let me start explaining the very basics. So one is I start with a line of action like this one. So here, this line. Then I take a different color and I start adding a vanishing point or perspective point. So place one here and here. This is the second one. So here's one and here's two. So what I will be doing next is, and you can take a ruler or a line tool in Procreate or Photoshop, whatever you work in. These things are not that complex, so you can actually do, yeah, every drawing app has some kind of line tool, right? So we can start drawing in these lines from out of this point. So this is perspective point one. So something like this. They're coming out of that line. And that first line I drew is actually the horizon line. So for example, when you're at sea or a large field, you could see the horizon, right? So that is the horizon line. It's also called the eye line. So we have these ones, and let's start adding some more lines here. So follow these, and like this here, and keep adding more. So there are a lot of lines. So using different colors can actually help. What I also do is make them a bit lighter, like this here. So once we have these guides, we can start adding and drawing a cube on it. So let's say we want to make the cube start here. And let's draw it here. So I'm following for these sides. I'm following to that vanishing point there. And this one goes vertical downward. So we don't have to worry about these lines. These go just straight down. So now I take this point, or actually here, this point, and I see here, it follows this line, right? So we can just follow this line and moving it here. You can also draw it between. Then you have, oh, here's the middle and here's the middle and then connect it like that. So we've drawn our first side. So now we know this point should go to there. So we don't have a green line to follow. So what we could do is we can draw a line like this, draw a line like this. So end them up here. So this side goes to there. This side moves to that vanishing point. And we can decide, we can actually draw, okay, that's another layer. And then we draw a line here to this point, and a line to here, this point. So now we can decide, so up here, so we have this whole side, and then we also can figure out with a line tool, this one, and if we go straight down, then we can see if it's correct or not. So is this correct? Yeah, now we have a cube, right? And you can draw on top of it, follow these sides here, here. So follow this one, this tutorial step by step if you want to. So here we have this. And actually there's also, we can, yeah, for this one, we can also draw these lines here. So it's almost like a glass cube. You're following these lines. Like this here. So now we can turn off actually all these layers. Oh, I don't want to search. So we can turn off and we have a cube in perspective. And we can use this cube to draw a car, for example. So let's draw a car in this perspective. So what I sometimes do is sometimes I turn off the perspective and I'm just going to draw a car here inside this cube, like I'm sculpting. So I have like this. Sometimes I also draw it on top of this grid. So here I want to have the tires here. So here the tire is here, so I know this height here. You can also see that this one is higher than this one, right? So here, this here. So maybe make a car here, this here, this here. Let's make it this high. Let's go here, here, something like this. Let's draw in a door. So we're now making a really tiny, super tiny car. I don't know if you can even call this a car. And let's draw the other side. So I think it's a bit far to go there. So let's end it here. So here, here. So you can see I follow these perspective guides, right? So I'm just using really basic. So I know this tire should be somewhere here. So sometimes I'm not even that precise. So maybe if this is a little bit too complex for you, you could also start with basic shapes, right? So here we have a cube like this. Oh, I follow these perspective guides, right? So a cube here, and for this car, there's also a cube here. So that is basically how I use perspective most of the time. And perspective can be really complex. But to be honest, most of the times I'm just using these kinds of perspectives because I want to keep it simple. So yeah, I think you can really practice it. So if you don't understand it, practice it by practicing this page step by step, and you will learn how to draw a car in perspective. So maybe if you don't really understand it, it will help to follow these steps, and then it will sink in. Trust me. So let's draw this train. So actually, I want to show a little bit about perspective with this one. So here you can see all these shapes going different directions. For example, here this cylinder is going to this point. So actually, we can see perspective here in this drawing. So if we draw lines following this point, they end up here. So they end here in this point. So we can actually use perspective to draw something like this here. So here we have these lines like this. Let's make them a bit lighter. So sometimes I just go a little bit freehand and use something like this here. So just as a guide. So here is on this circle or the cylinder, like this here. And let's add cylinder here on top. This here. And let's add, so this one is going to be a little bit different. Oh, for actually, let's just do these ones. Like this here. These sides should go to that point. This here, remove this. Let's draw cap like this here. Let's draw a shape here. Let's draw a shape here. So here you can see how these perspective and drawing these shapes come together. And to be honest, sometimes I play a little bit about the perspective. Sometimes I'm just not exactly same. So sometimes I turn it off once I've got those basics, and then I start drawing on top of it. And but it does really help to have a good understanding of perspective before you break those rules a little bit. But actually practicing these kinds of trains and drawing with these shapes is really useful, and have the perspective a bit in mind. So sometimes I also just draw some lines like this here, loose hand. And I don't even draw that vanishing point. And this works especially well when you're drawing in your sketchbook, because sometimes that vanishing point can be really far. And then I just start drawing here these shapes, and I use these as guides, right? So here. Here, and etc. So here I actually made a bit more of a complex final version to show it. So when I draw something more detailed like this, I try to be a little bit more precise with my perspective actually. So let's actually so pick a finishing point like this here. And let's draw these lines going here, there, like this, here, here, and let's add some more. And I actually like to draw these perspective guides, or I like I love to draw them manually instead of using some kind of app or tool to draw this perspective, because I think it's just really good to be able to draw this by hand. And sometimes I use a special brush I made, or in Procreate, for example, you have there's a drawing guide, and then you can make the perspective, let the app make the perspective for you. So here I'm drawing this cube here first to get a bit of an idea of how big the train was. And here these sides, I guess. So there's also somewhere some perspective here, but I don't even draw it that one. So let's make this a little bit narrower. Put this here. And yeah, let's start drawing in the train inside this one. So I'm going to start this side here. Here. So we have this first cube. Maybe add this with a roof on it. So things, yeah. I usually start with these big shapes, the biggest shapes first. So let's start here. So now I'm actually going out of this square. So it's a little bit different than my example. I would advise you to try to stay as close at that one. But if you're a bit more chaotic, like me, you can also be a bit more loose. But I just want you to learn how to follow these guides and how to draw these objects a little bit in perspective. So here, drawing these tire of these wheels. So following it on something like this here. So I'm actually messing up a little bit of the proportions. So maybe I need to change some stuff. So here with these, which are way too thick, but later you can see I make them thinner. So actually, I think I've drawn this part's really a bit too big. Maybe I want to make something like this here. So sometimes you can see here, I'm cheating a little bit, playing around a little bit with the shapes. So here, then I erase it. So this is actually, so now, and I would advise you to really follow this close as close as possible. But sometimes when I actually design something like this, my process looks a bit more like this. So first I try to get the proportions. So try to get the right size of all these different parts. So, yeah, I think this is a little bit more close to what I want. On this cylinder on top, this here, then here, this part. Draw in these wheels. Maybe let's make them already quite thinner. So here it should be just above this line and just under this line. Here. Then here. And now you can start adding in some smaller shapes like this one. So it does help to first draw these big shapes, and then later you can start adding in these smaller shapes. Maybe let's add this card to the back now. Something like this here. And also here, some wheels. Maybe I want to make this card a little bit less long, so something like this. and etc. So this is how I start with these blocks. Later, I will show some examples on how to add details. What I first want you to learn is how to draw these construction shapes and a little bit about perspective, that you get a sense of it. So perspective can be a bit technical and difficult to learn, but it's, especially with these kinds of drawings, it's really, really useful. So after you've drawn this stage, you're actually going to add shapes on top of these shapes. Like this here. And here. So this is the car. So here I'm also showing with basic shapes. So let's actually also show this one here. So this one is maybe a little bit easier than the train. So if the train is a bit too daunting, go ahead and try out this one. And all throughout this video tutorial and in the ebook, I'm showing difficult, simple one. It's a bit ordered on the type of vehicle. So for example, now I'm going to show a lot of cars. So I'm going to start here with a simple car. So like this, I'm starting with the cube. Then add another cube on top of it. This here. Try to get these shapes right. Sometimes you notice that it's not right, so then you can change it a little bit. So here, erase this a little bit here. So here. So here I'm drawing without perspective. And because of that, there will be some errors in the perspective. But sometimes you want to draw these kinds of things loose. It's also good to get a bit of a feel for perspective without having to draw it here. So now we have this shape. And now we can start adding some smaller shapes on top of it here, these things. And I think this one is a good to start practicing with. Just try to learn. So before you really dive into perspective, and it's okay to draw it a bit like this, a bit loose, but try to understand these lines. Go to one point and these ones as well. So here. These shapes a little bit. Here we have this door. Going like this. A tire. Here, a tire here. Find this perspective guide there. So here. Here's this window. And once we have this, we can start again adding some more details. So like this, try to think about how much space this needs. This here. This here. Top here. So also try to think that that's a bit of a shape like this here. So sometimes I'm drawing these perspective guides on top to understand a bit how these shapes are working on each other. So for example, here we can look a little bit inside this tire, right? Along this line. this here. This side. So again, if you're going to draw this car, follow these steps. These are a bit more accurate. Here I'm drawing it a little bit too fast, and then you can also see I'm making these tires a bit, I could have drawn them a bit wider. So to be honest, even if you draw as long as I do, you still make some mistakes. And that's totally fine. Don't be too hard for yourself. So here, and then here. You can add this thing, and then you can start sculpting and building away. But first start with these bigger shapes and work your way downwards. I want to say a little bit about adding value. So a lot of times when I finish a sketch, I also add some values and shadow. So I think about the light source. So that's coming from this side. So that means, let's take brush. So it means that here is shadow because the sun is here, shining here. So here is the shadow, this dark, this part is lighter. Let's pick a lighter color for that, or leave it white. Also possible, right? So here, this is white. So with a car like this, it's quite easy. So some parts are even darker than this part. So that would be between here where there is less light, so make it even more darker. Here's less light, so this part, these parts are darker. And that is how I paint or I shadow those kinds of things. So here another car. Show that one. Let's make this one a bit smaller. And here we can again practice that perspective. So you can draw this with or without perspective. Try to experiment a little bit about that. So here, drawing these lines. So now I'm actually drawing them freehand more. So I just want to show how loose you can be. Taking different color. And I think so somewhere here. So that vanishing point is too far away. So I'm just sketching it light in. So let's take a blue color for the box here. So let's draw a box somewhere here. Following these guides. A little bit farther. Really long car. It's a bit messy, but a lot of times my sketches are messy like that. So don't worry too much about that. That's the thing with these tutorials. I'm trying to be really clear, but when I'm actually drawing a lot of times, I'm super messy. So if you're messy like me, don't worry too much about it. And if you like to work cleaner, that's also really fine. So here we have this. And we can start to shape on top of here. So especially being as rough as I am here, sometimes it's useful when, for example, when you're storyboarding or you just have to draw something quickly, that's fine. So I want to have this part a little bit longer. So here you can see also, it's also fine to change stuff on the go. Yeah, I think this is okay. And sometimes it's actually quite charming to have a drawing that's not perfect, right? So here, but I think it's, yeah, it is good to learn those perspective guides first very well, so that will help you. Even when you're drawing more loose, you will have it in the back of your mind. So here, 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 these guys. Here you can see I start adding in the details, like this here. Shape here, shape there. Here, this part. So, yeah, I think this should be quite straight and going down here. Parts here. And go down here like this. Here. And let's draw the inside of this car. Now, just trying to be a bit sketchy and loose. So this is actually here I'm trying to figure out all the stuff out, changing some stuff. So this is something you could use for a storyboard, for example, where it's more important to just be clear and have, yeah, we can be a bit sketchy, but if I, yeah, actually I would also follow these steps for drawing like this, but then after this step, I would all clean it up here. Once I'm happy with it, you can start clean it up, maybe drawing the shadow here, like this here. So this, and let's start drawing on top of it. So cleaning everything a little bit up, making some changes to make it more correct, and etc. And you can clean it up as much as you would like. So maybe some things you can also start practicing when you find that perspective drawing too hard is to maybe just start with something like this here. So here you can see depth, you can see that here's the front and here's the side, but there's no real perspective. There's no vanishing point. So all these lines just go horizontal. So if you find the previous drawings too difficult, you can maybe start practice. And when you find the side profiles too boring, you can actually start with drawing a box like this. So you don't see the top, you see only two sides. Let's call this emblems. So here, this side here. And let's draw here. So you can first start really basic, like this here. Here, this one is hidden, of course. Take something like this here. So this should be the same size as and the white as this. Something like this. I think I drew this part a little bit too wide. That's why it's good to draw through. So something like this here. Yeah, now we have these shapes. And let's make this one a little bit smaller. And put this here. And we can start adding in tires, tire 1. And the other tire should be somewhere here. So we have the road. Drawing the next tire, like this here. And also here. So here I'm drawing these guides that can help you with getting the right proportions for everything. So here, like this here. Erase this a little bit. So sometimes you can see, oh, I need to move it a little bit closer. A bit farther. So something like this here. That's also the reason why drawing on the paper is more difficult. You can't change those things quite easily, but you will also learn from your mistakes more. And you can, of course, you use the eraser, and sometimes I make more mistakes on paper, but for some reason it always gets a little bit more charming. So it's totally fine to draw this, try to study this on paper, and I don't actually think you have to be exactly the same. It could help to try to get as close as possible. So you will learn how to draw construction and perspective very well. But when I draw cartoon, there are a lot of small mistakes in it. And that's also a little bit style, is basically some kind of errors that give it some personality, give it some own. So here you can see I'm adding some details on top of it. So here, slowly adding smaller shapes, like the door, for example. Of course, we also need these lamps on top of it. So slowly adding shape. So I think this one is actually very good to practice first. When you have a hard time with perspective, and you want to make the next step. So here, drawing in these details, and etc. Just keep adding shapes, right? So here, adding some more details. So this is sketch, so you can be really rough. Later you will clean it up. So first I'm trying to find a rough sketch that I like. So here's only in these details. Just keep adding stuff, maybe adding a shadow here. And keep adding stuff. So that's basically how I draw something like this. So once I have this sketch, I clean it up. But I will also show that in a different video where I go from all the steps from 0 to 1. But I think that learning how to sketch like this is super important if you want to learn how to draw vehicles. So basically, this is the same one as the ambulance, and but this one is really great one study. So maybe you can, after you did that ambulance, and maybe you use this video to see a bit of the steps, try it out yourself now with this one. Try to figure it out. And that's also what I really believe, is that you learn a lot by figuring out. I can show every step and that you follow it one-on-one, and that will definitely help you understand. But I think I've shown that enough in these parts. But if you're trying to figure out how to draw this one yourself using these images, and maybe it's a bit hard, but that will really help you a lot. So good luck. Go practice this one and try to see how close you can get. And maybe after this one, look up a vehicle you like on the internet, get a photo out of it, and make a cartoon version out of it like this. Or maybe first start to draw it more realistic, and then after that, try to make a version where it's more cartoon, playing around with the proportions, and I will talk about that more in the next videos. So that was it for this part. Thanks.